Hey, folks, and welcome to the show. This is Counter Clipping show number 101 for December 5th, 2022. Tonight, we are clipping in tribute to John Prados, Monty's D-Day, which I'll probably talk a little more about as we come to it, as we go through John Prados' many wargame designs, some of them seminal classics. I am drinking this generic West Coast style IPA because it'll be better for my voice while I'm doing the show. It is a typical American IPA in that it is dramatically overhopped. And it is literally generic. Somebody got me a beer advent calendar, which has a can of beer for each day in Advent. So that's the most beer I've ever had in this house, and the most beer I've had in any house for probably 20 years. So, tonight the topic is best of John Prados. I had it in mind to do like best of designers, and I just hadn't gotten around to doing one. And then John Prados passed away. Which is really unfortunate. I have put a link to the New York Times obituary in the video description for anybody that wants to check that out. You may hit a paywall, but I've read that article several times now, and I didn't hit a paywall. I got some prompts begging me to subscribe to the New York Times, which we won't be doing. But the obituary is quite lengthy and extensive and contains a bunch of stuff I didn't know about John Prados. So as we get started here, I'll remind everybody to please thumbs up the video. Please subscribe to the channel. If you want to help support the channel, you're doing that just by being here. But if you want to do more, you can consider becoming a patron. There's a link to that in the video description as well. So do that. Another way to support the channel is with super chats and super stickers, both of which are turned on. That is also a very good way to get your question or comment highlighted. And unless it's something absolutely nutty, I will read it off. And try and give you the best answer I can if it's a question, and if it's a comment, I'll just read it off. But that helps me to not miss comments in what might otherwise be a very packed show, and we have almost 100 people here already. So before we proceed, let's give a shout out to Six Actual, Abraxas MF, Alistair Logie, Andrew Frankie, Bayonet Brant from the Armchair Dragoons, Beat Cafe, welcome back. Bill Simone, Brent McCabe, Cataclysm Now, Chad Canetti, Dale Brady, Daniel Silverthorne, Dave 1013, Doug Blayart, Ed Holtzman, Eric Farago, welcome to the stream. Fast Hines, Findle 70, Hun 644, welcome to the stream. I don't recognize your name. The legend himself, Fucko, is here. James Whitmer, Jeff Anderson, Jeffrey Wesovich, Joe Faust from reasonably decent today, actually, Northeast Ohio, John Mogg, John Stanley, John Clark, Kevin Bertram, Kilroy, if Kilroy was here, Lind Platt from Central Ohio. I almost said Southern. It's Southern now for me. Mark McNair, Matt Davidson, Meandering Mike, whose channel, renamed channel, you should all check out. He's doing good stuff. Michael Simon, Mike Burnett, Pizza Frenzy Man, Point Dexter Games, Ray Garby, Richard D. Fortuna, Rick Cox, Robert Moffat, Sean Torno, Stigler is here, Strelnikov, Tim Greenhaw, Todd Cox, Vicky, Vince Ree, William Bird. Welcome to the show, and welcome back if you've been here before. If not, welcome for the first time. So I do have like actual, I'm not sure I'll take 2 hours for this. We're going to find out. But I have a couple of extra, not terribly wargamey topics at the end, and I can talk about the upcoming video projects as well. So that's why I'm not drinking whiskey tonight. Not that whiskey would hurt it, but I kind of need the throat lubrication. And if I drink that much whiskey, then I'll be passed out by the end of the show. So before we get to any of the other stuff, we do actually have a copy. I actually thought about picking that on this, clipping that on this show, but I started going through it, and it's going to be a little more complicated than expected. I do have a copy of Army of the Heartland, which is another John Prados game, and we'll talk about these in detail. And it turns out that the counter sheet, I think it's the first counter sheet that came with the game, was so badly misregistered on the back that clearly somebody at some point had requested a second counter sheet. So I kind of had to figure out that was what was going on, and then some of it's clipped and some of it's not. So Mike has needs 10 more subscribers. So go over there to Meandering Mike's channel and please subscribe. You can now search for Meandering Mike in YouTube, and it will actually find him unlike before. So John Stanley, thank you so much. I do not have this, but it is a game we're going to talk about. It's a really pretty interesting game. Year of the Rat was an SPI game, 1972, about the Vietnam War. While the Vietnam War was going on, still, that is a bold choice for a designer, in my opinion. I think, but I don't want to say a bunch, but there's a few people not right now talking about doing games on the Ukraine war, and I think they're being premature. I don't think we have particularly good information about what's going on over there. What are you going to do? Figure it out from Twitter? A war that Ukraine is clearly winning, regardless of any success or lack thereof that they may be experiencing on the actual physical battlefield. So let me pull the stuff up, and the first thing we're going to talk about, actually, and because I don't know where this is or what's going to happen to it now that John Prados has passed away. There was a designer's signature edition of Panzerkrieg. Let me move this. Can I do this? Ugh. That's not better. Fuck it. You just won't see me. It's all good. All right, so there was a designer signature edition of Panzerkrieg coming from Compass. I don't know how far along this was. This wasn't something that I asked about or heard anybody ask about, but I was actually playing a game. I so this was produced. We'll get to Panzerkrieg and its lineage in due time. So if anybody from Compass who knows something is available, then and this might get asked and or answered in the next Compass Games live stream, pipe up in the chat, because I'm not sure how far along this was, or if it was just a pump and dump reprint, or if Prados had decided to do additional development work on it. Now, I guess I have to disclaimer here and say that I didn't know John Prados. I never met John Prados. I never corresponded with John Prados. So I am going to leave it to those who did to give personal reminiscences about John Prados, the man. And I would encourage you to read that New York Times obituary, actually, because as much as John Prados might be known to us as a wargame designer, he was very well known, probably more well known as a historian. Clark Commando 1983. Welcome, Mark. Thanks for coming. So many very well regarded books. And like I said, the New York Times article I thought was very illuminating, possibly unusually for the New York Times. So check that out. Link again in the video description. So I don't know what's going on with the Panzerkrieg Designer's Signature Edition. One might hope that it might still come out, but I don't know. Certainly, I mean, I could speculate that, hey, maybe it'll be delayed, and maybe it will be delayed, and maybe it won't. I have no idea. This thing could be completely in the can for all I know. I have actually heard Alistair Logie says that they're non and X drinkers. There are actually some pretty good non-alcoholic beers out there. O'Doul's isn't one of them, and in fact, any of the macro brewers non-alcoholic beers, I would assume, are garbage, because their regular beer is garbage too. But there are some microbreweries that do non-alcoholic beers that are supposed to really be quite good. I haven't tried any of them. I don't drink enough beer to warrant exploring that topic, and it just hasn't come up. So we're going through these in reverse order that BGG has them ranked in. Bear in mind that a bunch of the ones on the bottom are probably unranked, like this one, Wellington in the Peninsula, 1975, from Rand. So I guess it's a sign of some level of seriousness when you have a war game published by Rand, who's been doing it professionally for decades now. But here is a John Prados design, and it's what it sounds like. I obviously do not have a copy of this to check the credits. This credits Vincent J. Cumbo, Al Nafi, and John Prados. Al Nafi, of course, another SPI veteran. And I guess I'll throw a little tease out. We may have some SPI veteran. There may be some SPI veteran content coming soonish. And by soonish, I mean, probably looking at January on that. So stay tuned on that. I don't have any firm news to report right now, but you know who you are, and thank you. So Wellington in the Peninsula, strategic level area movement game of the Peninsular Campaign from 1808 to 1814. 9 separate and complete situation games. Normal people would call those scenarios. Professional war gamers apparently call them situation games. So I don't drink very much either, to be completely honest. I don't like to feel crappy. It's really not any more complicated than that. All right. So beyond this, I mean, are there any copies of this for sale? There's a copy going for 150 bucks, very good in the US. That's interesting, but unless one is a true aficionado, then I don't think that this is probably worth hunting down. It's got to be pretty rare, and if you consider that, then maybe 150 bucks on BGG Marketplace ain't that bad. Rank Outsider, first of all, welcome to the stream, and thank you for this comment. He says that a John Krantz post on CSW from November 30th said no impact Panzerkrieg. I find really any answer completely believable. I just didn't know. So that's good news, I guess. I mean, it's bad news, right? Let's face it. But it's, for those eagerly awaiting Panzerkrieg, I guess that's optimistic. So yeah, James Whitmer, me too. I did this in my 20s, and I'm good now. I'm happy to go after quality instead of quantity. Not that this stuff is the greatest stuff I've ever had, but it's not terrible either. Von Manstein, Battles for the Ukraine, 1941 to 1944. Also from Rand and from the same design team, which includes Vincent J. Cumbo and Al Nafi. This is another one, operational level system of land warfare in South Russia during 1941 to 44, covers Ukraine from Stalingrad west. If you like me, and there's some copies here for not insane amounts of money, if you're really curious about this thing, taking a look at the counters real quick. Pre-rounded counters, look at that. Pre-rounded counters in whenever the hell this came out, 1975? Yep. How about that? I mean, they're not well-rounded exactly, but, just goes to show you that that is a thing that's been around for a long time. These early Rand things, man, I just am not going to be able to tell you anything about these. Meandering Mike says that Wellington in the Peninsula price is a gouge, which, John Prados just passed away. That might be why they feel emboldened to do that. He says that the price over the last few years averages about $38. In general, bear in mind that I don't really have a high opinion as a hobby war gamer of much that was published by Rand. Some of it is historically interesting in terms of the history of the hobby, and I'm happy to be corrected and or educated on this of some fabulous design that they did. But generally speaking, I don't think anybody out here is going to run down old copies of Rand games, other than if you're trying to collect the complete works of John Prados. The Victory of Arminius, the Teutoburg Forest in, that looks to be 9 AD. This is a game from LPS in their series. What's that series called? This series is called 20 Decisive Battles of the World. This is based on a book by Joseph B. Mitchell and Edward Creasy about the 20 decisive battles of the world. And they did a whole series of these. And I don't know if there's all 20 are out yet or not. This is from LPS. And kind of I don't own anything from LPS, but they're pretty closely affiliated with Against the Odds, and I now have kind of a lot of stuff from Against the Odds, and I have a pretty high opinion of the stuff from Against the Odds that I've got. And the only real serious complaint I have with them are those Mickey Mouse pseudo boxes / pseudo counter trays that they've used to package stuff in. But if you're interested in this particular battle, and again, it is, Romans versus Germans in 9 AD, so it's a little bit specialized. Looking at the map, artists credited here, Terry Leeds, Mark Mahaffey. Not sure I have an opinion on this map as to which one of those otherwise talented gentlemen produced it, but there you go. But it is a hex and counter game, and the counters are reasonably decent looking, and certainly of a graphical unity with a lot of the stuff that I have, at least from Against the Odds. Let me put it that way. But I think that's probably Mark Mahaffey, just the fact that he does a lot of their stuff. So another interesting piece here. In this case, from Turning Point Simulations, I think is what it's going to say on the box. If you look at this, you'll see the little TPS logo down here. I think LPS is the parent company. I but again, I'll be happy to be corrected on that too. All right, next up is another Rand oddity, Vicksburg: The War for the West, 1975, by the same creative team of Vincent Cumbo and Al Nafi, along with John Prados. Two-player game covering the battle in the West. Um, Four separate situation games, aka scenarios. And I think we'll agree that perhaps this is not the pinnacle of wargaming map art. Brant points out that there are actually two different companies. There's Rand Corporation, who are the government people, and Rand Game Associates, and they're not the same. I didn't know that. I always assumed they were, in fact, the same. And Brant says that LPS are the parent company of ATO, Turning Point, and one or two others. Okay. So Vicksburg War for the West, again, another early period oddity from, this says Rand Game Associates. Next is I'm not sure. This is going to be one of a couple of these where I have to say this. I'm not sure who should get credited for the design here, considering that 19 designers are in fact credited. Tide of Iron Designer Series Volume 1. So this is new scenarios created by a variety of different people for the Tide of Iron game, which I don't know that it's particularly similar to Memoir 44, but it is definitely in the same space as Memoir 44. This is almost certainly true. There you go. Alistair nails it once again. So we don't get any information about the scenarios here. We get information about the credits of the designers. So there's John Hill stuff in here. There's some Don Greenwood stuff in here. Mark Simonich, Jack Green, Ulrich Blenneman, Richard Berg, of course, Mike Benighoff, and some other. This is, if you're interested into Tide of Iron, I actually think this would be a pretty interesting product to have. To be honest, but I am not particularly into Tide of Iron, so we will move on. Okay, so this is one we'll talk about later. So there is a product which we will get to called John Prados' Third Reich from Avalanche Press. It's another one of those where I'm not sure exactly who was the lead on that, because it is largely a different system than the original Third Reich. They did a Pacific version called Great Pacific War, The Great Pacific War, which we will also see here, I believe. And this is the expansion sort of booklet for both of those games. This is the Third Reich / Great Pacific War Player's Guide from 2004. A bunch of people credited here as well. This did come with counters. Otherwise, it's a magazine style thing. Not the worst counters I've ever seen, that's for sure. Normally, actually, I think Avalanche Press has pretty decent counters, to be honest about it. These are not stunning, but they're not the worst I've seen either. So this whole thing I know it had some new scenarios, variant rules, new scenarios, new political markers. It looks like there's some what appear to be research options, which is a thing that was missing from the classic Third Reich. And I think we'll end up talking a lot about Third Reich when that comes up. So as Brant said, I think we got that. So yeah, this does not have a BGG rating. We have not hit that point yet. This is so in recent decades, or at least the last 10 or 15 years anyway, John Prados did a lot of stuff for Against the Odds magazine. Okay, and this is one of those games. This is a game called Set Europe Ablaze. This is about resistance to German / Nazi occupation in Europe. It has a map that is like this real abstract area map, which just does not really spark my imagination too much, but it's not like, let me put it this way. A hex map would have felt really super weird here. Let me put it that way. So this kind of map is the kind of thing I would expect in a game like this. Let me put it that way. Look at the counters here. Looks like we might, come on BGG. Those are the backs of the counters. Um, I feel like I am open to suggestions as to the causes for this, but I feel like a lot of these against the odds magazines do not get the attention they deserve in comparison to your average S&T magazine war game, for example. And I'm not really sure why that is. So that is something that we might have a chat about at a later time as well. But this is a pretty interesting looking game. It's it's about the resistance. I don't know if it's something I'll buy. I'm pretty sure it doesn't go for a bunch of money. I can tell you that. I'm pretty sure it's not in print anymore, but I might be wrong about that. Next up is The Seeds of Disaster from 2015, again from Against the Odds. Artist credited here on BGG is Mark Mahaffey. This is The Seeds of Disaster, how events of the 1930s affected World War II, specifically the German invasion. There's like no pictures of this. This sounds really potentially very intriguing, and I have essentially no information on it whatsoever. I mean, I've got this thing, but I mean, I don't have a sense of what it looks like or what it feels like or any of that. If there's any video on this, but I don't see anything. There's like no files, no forums. It's never been mentioned. And allegedly, it's been out for a couple of years. So if anybody has this thing and wants to field an opinion on it, I would be pretty interested to hear it. Next up is Salerno Operation Avalanche from West End Games. There is a game cover you won't get away with nowadays. Salerno is a brigade, regiment, battalion level simulation of the Allied landings in the Gulf of Salerno. Uses a hex grid to regulate movement and combat. Contains a battle game, an invasion game, and a campaign game. This is another one where it's like, wait a minute, there's like very little information here other than some once again, though, pre-rounded counters, and these are actually rounded, unlike those other ones, from 1977. So apparently, that's a lot of older. That technology is quite a bit older than I thought it was. I'm not sure I remember mentioning that or observing that in the past. Chad Kennedy says we should do a show about magazine war games and related games, or wargaming magazines and related games. Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. We've actually done that on the show with Dan, but that is a different show and is going to produce a different output than were I to cover it on this show. So, no picture of the map or anything like that. Don't have any information about this. The same design team that we had over at Rand, though, Vincent Cumbo, Al Nafi, and John Prados. Now, Al Nafi, if you don't recognize the name, he's written a fair number of books as well, some with Jim Dunnigan. Probably best known as a wargame designer for designing Imperium Romanum, all three editions of it. The first, I believe, two from West End Games, and then the recent new version from Decision, which actually looks good. I mean, the original had some issues, and I think the Decision version inherits those issues while not really fixing anything. But it does have some extra scenarios in it and that kind of thing. It's essentially the same game with better components. All right, moving on. All right, Pentagon Games from Harper and Row. This is another one, not a simulation. Events in the game are intended to be illustrated, and the decisions fictitious, woven from the progress of play. Um, this R&D solitaire game is based on a decision tree mechanism that leads players through a set of alternative developments. An introductory level war game. The goal of the player is to destroy the other's forces. This is not telling me a lot, but it sounds like it might be mechanically intriguing. And then we see this, and it kind of looks like Monopoly. So I'm not entirely sure how to take this. Obviously, this looks extremely abstract. So perhaps not my bag. But Al Nafi writes a lot of columns for Strategy Page. I think I have to admit I didn't know that Strategy Page was even still around. So, yeah, but this isn't one that I think very many of us will be particularly familiar with. On to Berlin, John Prados and C. Rawling from LPS Inc. This is a bonus mini game, hypothetical last value of World War II, codenamed Operation Eclipse. Assumes the Allies launch an airborne assault on Berlin in March 1945. Does require ownership of Fortress Berlin. So this is just a this is basic, sounds basically just like an alternate history scenario, to be honest. This is an interesting little piece of, I don't know what, I guess that's just the cover sheet. So interesting piece of production. Alistair Logie, we're going to get to this. We're going to talk about this in more detail later, but yes, it's the same game. And I knew it was, because as soon as I managed to get a copy of the S&T original, that they announced that it was coming back. So I just and Clark Commando 1983 says that the new version of Fortress Berlin comes with that expansion. And Jeff Anderson says that an airdrop on Berlin is a bonkers idea, which I believe we can all agree with. Let me mention, let me interrupt for a second here. I'll get rid of Balk Friday. Actually, we haven't talked about Balk Friday yet. So this is Balk Friday, as in German General Hermann Balk, 11th Panzer Division versus the Soviets along the Cheer River. This is certainly a situation that we have seen a number of games on. Let me put it that way, including Panzer battles from DNESIG and MMP. It does have a hex map. Looks relatively straightforward, and this is another LPS Inc. game. And it looks like this was the one that was bundled with On to Berlin as well. So moving on along, I mentioned, I think last week or the week before, that a lot of people are feeling a little less comfortable on Twitter nowadays. So some folks are examining alternatives, and a couple of the alternatives were. Let me pull this back up for a minute here. A couple of the alternatives that were floated were Mastodon and uh, uh, Piss Nest. So Nest. I can't remember what the hell it's called now, because it's been down for like a week. That was going to be the joke. Hive Social. So that's been down. They had a critical security flaw, and that's a problem. So they shut it down. But there is a Wargamers Mastodon server that's just for Wargamers, and it's not quite like Discord, because there's like a federated thing going on where servers can talk to one another, and you could follow anybody anywhere. But you can also just view the local feed, and the local feed at wargamers.social is pretty good. I posted a link to it with an invite that will still be good right now on Twitter earlier. There's also a thread on BGG from the fellow who runs the server, so check that out if you're interested in that. Mo from Mo's Game Table, thanks for stopping by. I will also mention that things are going well over there. Let me put it that way. If anybody wants an invite to that, let me know. I can roll off a one-off invite and send it to you via email if necessary, or any of the other ways people get in touch with me. William Bird, thanks for stopping by, and thanks for signing up. So the other thing is the Ardwulf's Lair Discord server still open. There's been a little bit of we're starting to have enough people where there's actually people talking. So that's good. There is a link in the ticker to that, which will be good for the next 24 hours as well. All right, so let's pull this back up. Now we're going to get to Monty's D-Day. So this is a separate listing in BGG, even though it is just a new version. This is the game I am clipping right now, Monty's D-Day, and one hopes this won't be the last John Prados game ever published, but it is the most recently published John Prados game, as far as I can tell. This looks good. It only covers the first, I think, 3 days after the landings. It can also be combined with their earlier game, Bradley's D-Day. So this requires a little bit of. Do I have another listing for this? We'll do it this way. All right, so this is the original. This is actually S&T in the relatively brief window when it was owned by TSR. And this is, the original game that was just republished. And this is exactly what it sounds like. This covers D-Day on the British beaches. Now, many, many years later go by, and against the odds does a new John Prados' game called Bradley's D-Day. With nice new art, nice new counter art and map art and all that stuff by Mark Mahaffey. Nice looking game. And you could, in principle, have combined that with this original Monty's D-Day game, but one map would look nice and one of them would look terrible because it was done by TSR and they didn't care. So yes, Fendel 70, this is the first, if we're considering this a series, this is the earliest game in the quote unquote series. But then many years later, Bradley's D-Day comes out, and you can technically combine that version of Bradley's D-Day with this version of Monty's D-Day. But again, it's ugly. So somebody decided that they were going to redo it as a new Against the Odds game. And it is very nice. There's an unboxing video of this in the pipeline. But it's a interesting topic. D-Day in general is one of my favorite wargame topics. We have some like Swedish commandos here or something like that. That's interesting. I don't know anything about that. The magazine looks really good too, by the way. This, it looks good to me. I am absolutely going to play this at some point. And I think there's some kind of solo. I might be thinking of something else, because I've just in the last couple of weeks I've just obtained like 6 issues of Against the Odds. So not sure I'm thinking of the correct game when I say I thought I remember a solitaire card being in there. I don't actually believe that to be the case. But in any case, issue 54 of Against the Odds, and I believe this might be the latest issue as well. So if you're into D-Day in particular, it might be worth checking this out. And it's certainly a visual feast compared to the old TSR one. There's no doubt about that. 4 Roads to Paris. Didn't we talk about this already? I thought we did. All right, 4 Roads to Moscow. Why did Barbarossa fail? This looks just as interesting, actually. So I will also say Bradley's D-Day says, Findle70 says Bradley's D-Day at least has a solitaire mode. So maybe I am thinking of this one, or maybe I'm thinking of Bradley's D-Day because I unboxed them both in the same video since they both showed up at the same time. I actually ordered these before John Prados passed away because Against the Odds was doing this thing where you could get a map and counter and a CD with everything else on it for La Bataille de Vauchamp, which is the smallest La Bataille game that was published in a print edition in Against the Odds magazine. And you could get that for free in limited stock, of course, if you bought, I think it was $100 worth of stuff. So I picked up these 2 John Prados games, and then like a couple days later, he passed away. I have since ordered one other game from John Prados off the BGG marketplace. I have no visibility on when it's coming. That game is Campaigns of Robert E. Lee, which I will get to that series when I get to it. Let me put it that way. In the course of the evening. If 4 Roads to Paris sounds interesting, then 4 Roads to Moscow sounds just as interesting, except that in this case, BGG has been kind enough. I mean, this ain't BGG's fault, but I'm going to whine about it. Has seen fit to give us some more pictures, except that this has something about Slaughterhouse. I'm not sure what this is or why it's here. But in any event, we do have, is that the name of the game? Is it called Slaughterhouse? I'm a little confused here. Here's Strike the Bear. All right, so maybe we don't have any actual illustrations here. Yep, no idea. Okay, so actually this is all right. So here is it, does it actually say ATO 58? ATO 58's not out yet, I can tell you that. So what this is 4 different titles about Barbarossa. This doesn't sound like the same thing as 4 Roads to Paris at all. John Prados is one of the 4 designers that contributed. The others are Roger Nord, Ted Racer, and Mike Ranella. Very often, ATO puts out a mini game. Most of the issues I have some kind of mini game or postcard game or something in them. Now, am I ever going to play any of those? It seems unlikely. There's one on V Weapons that actually looks kind of intriguing. So I was misremembering this actually, and these all different games are literally the different games that came in the issue. Next up is Beyond Leipzig, Council of Conflict of Nations. Now, apparently this is the system from Beyond Waterloo, which I heard said was John Prados' favorite of his own designs. Does it? That's it. This seems less interesting to me, to be honest. Um, if we're gonna like explore the geopolitical causes of why what happened, I'm all into that. But this designer four-way slam here, I think, is a little less interesting to me. So John Clark says that the next release is 58. This wasn't, this isn't an against the odds show, but boy, we're going to cover a lot of against the odds games. This came out from Last Stand Games, a company that's done a few games. They've done more than this, and well, they've done one more than this. Verdun on the Volga, which is relatively highly regarded, 4 years apart. I recognize the cover, the cover style here. This uses the system from Beyond Waterloo, and it uses it to simulate the Leipzig campaign instead, basically. So, so moving along, this was one that I think a lot of people will probably have pretty fond memories of. This is Casino. This was in S&T something 60 something. Does it say 71? And this is a pretty well regarded SPI classic. There's still people playing this. You should be able to get it for not an obscene amount of money. I'm putting these all in the wrong piles. Yeah, you can get a like new copy for $5 here, according to this, assuming it comes with the game. Yeah, magazine only. So not as good a deal as I'd thought. But still, there's a lot of copies here. So if you want a copy of Casino, you can get this. Now, there are some people that didn't like this too. Let me point that out. But there are also some people that I've heard speak highly of it. I had it very briefly at one point. I may have been selling it for somebody, and I didn't really look at it during that time. Next, I had no idea that this was a John Prados game. This is GDW's Pearl Harbor. Artist says Rich Banner and Roger McGowan. I assume that's Roger on the cover and Rich Banner on the inside. This is a game, despite the name, that covers basically the entire war in the Pacific between the United States and Japan. And it's got what I think you'll consider, this is 77, what I think you'll consider to be typical counters for GDW in 1977. This is a very, very GDW-esque map piece here. But it covers kind of a lot too. And here's the counters, and these look, pretty much like GDW counters as well. This is a pretty interesting looking game to me, actually. You should be able to get it reasonably inexpensively. Oh, I got a whole nother strip of counters here. Crap. Let's look at the marketplace here, but I don't think this is going to go. Oh, there's. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. We are having a problem. Okay, I'm not sure what's going on here, but we may be having technical difficulties. Let's check it from the other side. Computer seems to have frozen on me. So I am not sure if anybody can still hear me or not. Did we lose the internet? Doesn't look like it. Okay. I'm going to give this about 10 seconds and then I'm going to reboot the computer. God damn it. The entire internet just go down or what? No, you guys could still hear me. I've lost the ability to share the screen, though. I've lost control of the screen, and I can't even control alt delete here. I am going to have to reboot and hop back in. So I will be back in about 2 minutes. Okay, I think we're back. Let me know if there's any problems. Sorry about that. It is getting to be time for a couple of new computers around here. Let me put it that way. Let me share the screen again, and we'll resume talking about Pearl Harbor. How's that? That doesn't work either. All right, you can live without my ugly mug for a night. Okay, so Pearl Harbor. This looks pretty interesting. I don't know how it. Yeah, I don't know to what extent that it's good or how well it holds up. But this is a pretty early attempt to do a fairly serious simulation of the Pacific War. So a kind of an interesting item here. I wouldn't mind picking a copy of this up. This is where it locked up on me when I was going to see if there were any copies for sale. There aren't. Noble Knight appears to have one for $50, possibly, and you don't know what kind of condition that is without looking at it. This is other than Monty's D-Day, I think the first of the games in the list that I've got. The Tabletop's Edge. Welcome to the stream. Thanks for coming by. And I will echo the comments of whoever it was that asked is where's my whiff and Goss videos? So because I'm dying over here. I'm just dying over here. So toppling the Reich. This is a West operational game about the fighting around the West Wall. It's a pretty good looking game. And it's a pretty big game. It's quite a large game for a magazine game. So I think we're going to try. I might not succeed at this, but I think we're going to try to get all of this into one tray. And by all of this, um, I mean Monty and Bradley's D-Day. We'll see if I can actually make that happen. It kind of looks like yeah, maybe, maybe we'll see. It is supposed to be a slog. That part was not an accident. So I think we're going to be able to do it. When I box up magazine games, unless they're like some kind of crazily large magazine game, which I do have a few of, I would prefer that to put two in the same box, or two in the same counter tray, which is normally not a problem. But as you can see, pretty nice looking map. Like I said, I've got this. I haven't played it. I picked this up at Compass Expo at off the flea market table a couple of years ago. I think three, not the last one, but the one before. Let me put it that way, which I think was my first one. It's a pretty interesting looking game. I've looked through it, and it is, as far as I'm aware, still available from Against the Odds. Again, it's a pretty large game, so I don't know what the price is, but there's probably some on the marketplace here. This guy says he's got a like new one for $15, but how much you want to bet this is just a magazine? No, it says plus magazine for $15, so somebody jump on that. Interesting looking game. Here's another one that I've never owned, but I've talked to people who have, and they didn't really speak particularly highly of it. But Campaigns of Napoleon. This is from West End Games back in the day when West End Games did war games, at least occasionally, before they got on the Star Wars gravy train. They did war games, but this is a pretty interesting looking one. This covers, as far as I could tell, on a scenario basis, this is about the best view of the whole thing that I had. You can kind of do a good chunk of the entire Napoleonic Wars on here. Obviously, you're not getting Spain on that map. The counters are pretty much West End Games, circa 1990 quality counters. But this is an interesting look at 1980, I should say. This is kind of an interesting looking game. So wouldn't mind picking this up, and somebody's got a copy of this that they're probably willing to get rid of pretty inexpensively. And as you can see, copies do not go for a ton of money. Now, Fast Heinz says it's broken. I am completely prepared to believe that. At some point, however, I may be willing. HUN 644 says he's got a copy of Pearl Harbor in good condition. Potentially interested. Let me know. Let me know what you got. At some point, I mean, this is why I picked up the TSR Le Grand Guerre too, because I don't believe that it's good, but I believe there might be something there to offer in terms of, is it a fixable game? Could you turn it into something better? I kind of feel like this is probably going to fit in that same space. Let me put it that way. So moving along, Quezon, 1968, also from Against the Odds. This is from 2002. My I'm throat's feeling pretty rough right now. And I assume this is about Quezon, turning point of the American War in Vietnam, 1968, framed by the Tet Offensive as well as the campaign featured here, the fighting for Quezon, region just below North Vietnam, Quang Tri province, vulnerable to threats from the North Vietnamese. Is this like really quite large? Is this the back? This might be the back. Is this another thing where there's 15 games in a magazine? That's possible. How did we get to go tell the Spartans? Or is this, I don't know. It's hard to tell because I don't have this magazine. I feel like a bumbler here. Somebody says, Mo says that Quezon has hideous graphics, which I certainly can believe, but this isn't them. So this is something else that was in the magazine, apparently. And in fact, This it sounds like Kson was the mini game in the magazine, and the big game was Go Tell the Spartans, which was the game about the Thermopylae. That is a that's confusing, but probably some people are less confused than I am. So this is true. At the same time, um, sometimes there aren't that many games in that kind of space, right? When you're talking about some kind of grand operational game, like I'm talking here not about campaigns in Napoleon, although it's quite similar in scale. Well, it's kind of similar in scale. Let me put it that way. There's really not much in the same space that TSR Le Grand Guerre is in. I mean, it's kind of related to the old SPI Le Grand Guerre, but it's 4 maps. It's got like 8 counter sheets or something like that. It's a real ambitious game that I'm told didn't quite work at the end of the day. And I'm now talking about, I think, something that I'd be curious to look at, but aren't necessarily motivated to go buy a copy. Let me put it that way. Warsaw Rising: Revolt of the Polish Underground, 1944. Here's a grim fucking topic. Let me tell you, on a hex grid, no less. Simulation of the Resistance in Warsaw in 1944, published in S&T 107. I assume this is TSR as well, because I'm only saying that because the cover looks like it. This could be very interesting potentially. Also super depressing potentially. Here's the whole thing. So it's like literally the middle of Warsaw revolting against the occupiers. That's potentially really interesting. And to say the least, there aren't a lot of games on this kind of topic. There are some tactical scenarios, believe it or not, in ASL dealing with this particular period, but they're not favorite scenarios of anybody, I don't think. So this looks kind of interesting. What's the used game landscape look like? Not expensive. If you want a copy, $20 here in the US, like new condition, allegedly. Elnafi's The Great War. So this was published by One Small Step, and I don't know if there's a Rand version or what. I mean, I assume there is because it says so, but I've certainly never seen that. If we look at versions, we'll see that there's a 1976 Rand version. I'm unclear as to the provenance of this, though, because we're going to have. I mean, it says Al Nafi's The Great War on it, so I take Al Nafi to be the primary designer on this, but maybe that's not true. John Longshore asks if MMP's ASL pre-order Drop Zone St. Mary release is supposed to be a series of games or just a single release. There are additional ASL Drop Zone historical modules in the pipeline. Bear in mind that they may take quite a while to actually come out. Some of those things in the ASL pipeline have been in the pipeline for 20 years. This says Rand Game Associates. So I don't like the cover of this. I don't like the way the map looks. It's an area movement map. I just don't need that, right? Nothing wrong in principle with area movement maps. I just don't need another World War I area movement game, right? This looks like the original Rand map in glorious low resolution. And it's fine for 1977, but I don't know that folks are going to be running this down. And it doesn't feel to me like the One Small Step edition got all that much attention either. Well, they've estimated a lot of things over the years. Let me put it that way. I don't necessarily hate area movement from first principles, but there are certain topics that I prefer a hex grid for, and something that covers all of World War One is one of those things. I've seen it done good with a point-to-point map in Fields of Paths of Glory. I almost said Fields of Glory, which is a video game. I believe that some of the drop zone. I assume there's British 6th Airborne drop zone stuff coming. Let me put it up. Let me put it like So yeah, I poo-pooed this when it came out. Whether that's justified or not is a completely different story, and I'm unclear as to whether it's Al Nafi's game or John Prados' game, and it may not be accurately reflected in the credits provided by Board Game Geek, because Board Game Geek is not 100% reliable for that. Now, in this case, where we have designer John Prados, that's probably accurate, right? Because they're not muddy in the waters. Artist by Kevin Zucker on this. This is Bodyguard Overlord. There's another one I've heard kind of mixed things about. It's an area movement map, but if it's kind of like a game about the geopolitics of what's going on in there rather than the military campaigns, then I'm okay with that. Simulation of intelligence, deception, and preparations preceding the Allied invasion of Normandy in June 1944 and their effect on the subsequent course of military operations. In principle, that sounds interesting. I have heard mixed things about the game. It does not have a spectacularly high rating on BGG, but I don't care about that. I have certainly differed from BGG's ratings before. Meandering Mike, I will be very interested in hearing that about that. Look Away. We're gonna wait on Look Away. We are gonna let's move Look Away up to. We'll move it up to here. All right. Next up is the original Monty's D-Day, which we've already talked about. Next up after that is Bradley's D-Day. This came out in 2011. I think it's a bit miraculous that Against the Odds still has this in stock. And they do, because I just ordered it. It's a nice looking game. I had looked at it before and it was kind of on the want list. And I just, never got around to buying it for whatever reason. I now need a couple more bookshelf boxes for Against the Odds magazines, that's for sure. I think I had 3 issues of Against the Odds, and then I've picked up about 7 or 8 of them in the last couple of months. So, but pretty nice looking game. I think we can agree. Mark Mahaffey art. I've never had any problems thinking Mark Mahaffey's art has been ugly. Don't believe I've seen that at all. There have been Mark Mahaffey maps where I felt like there were significant readability problems. I'm not really seeing that on here. There's not enough different kinds of terrain for I think this to be a problem. By the way, I take this game to be a battalion scale game. I think that's roughly an accurate statement. Therefore, Monty's D-Day is going to be about that too. But remember, it only covers the first 2 or 3 days of the campaign, so you don't have a million American divisions in there or anything like that. I think you might have 3. No, you should have at least 4, but even so, you're not oh, Tim Zales. I wish you could stay. But this looks good. Like I said, I've wanted this for years, and I wasn't sufficiently motivated to pick it up until they did that thing for Beauchamp. So which is already punched and clipped and organized, by the way. So this is John Prados' Beyond Waterloo, and I believe I heard him quoted, or somebody quoted him as saying this was his favorite of his designs. And again, it sounds interesting. It sounds as much like it's about the sort of broader political context than it necessarily is about the Waterloo campaign itself. Now, in this case, because I've looked into this, the design is by John Prados. Lembit Tover is the developer. So, and art is by Charlie Kibler and Mark Mahaffey. This is an area movement map as well, but again, based on my understanding of what this game is trying to do, I am okay with that. It's an interesting sounding game. Let me put it that way. And of course, the topic, it goes without saying, is pretty interesting. Next up, these are going to load as I go because I had to reboot the whole computer, which was less painful than it could have been, I suppose. All right, this is the game I have coming: The Campaigns of Robert E. Lee. This again, this is what BGG at least calls the American Civil War campaigns. John Prados. So there's 3 games in this series. The lowest rated of which is Look Away, which we'll talk about in a second. The middle of which is this game, Campaigns of Robert E. Lee. And the highest rated of which is Army of the Heartland, which is the one that I have. Like I said, I did pick this up too, so hopefully we'll have this coming in soonish. That sure looks like an American tank battalion, to be honest. I'll keep it in its own compartment for now. Garrison Ben, thank you so much for no comment. Much appreciated. Um, oh, this sounds very interesting. Then, in that case, maybe waiting on Beyond Waterloo is the right answer. Carl Crater from the Wargame Boot Camp says they're making a deluxe version that will update the map and add an 1814 scenario. That sounds very good. So yeah, if they redo that, I'll probably buy it. Now, campaigns of Robert E. Lee. So let's just talk about all three of these at the same time. Where's Army of the Heartland? All right, here's Army of the Heartland. And again, this is the one I have. So this is an operational Civil War series. Okay, and there's 3 games in the series. Army of the Heartland covers pretty much the entire Western Theater from 1861 to 1863. Campaigns of Robert E. Lee covers pretty much the entire. I hope I just said Western Theater because that's what I meant. Campaigns of Robert E. Lee covers pretty much the whole Eastern Theater from 1861 to 1865. And then Look Away covers the very end of the war. In looks like Sherman's March on Atlanta, actually. And this was a who published this? The counters look pretty similar, actually, to the counters in Army of the Heartland. This is against the odds as well. It's against the odds annual 2007. Um, Although this does not benefit from the absolutely stunning Rick Barber maps that are in Army of the Heartland, and from pictures, the map in Campaigns of Robert E. Lee looks pretty friggin' nice too. This doesn't benefit from that. The artist is credited here as Craig Grando, and while there's nothing wrong with this map. It's not Rick Barber. That's all. This is a perfectly serviceable map, and yeah, this looks like the extension of Army of the Heartland to cover that drive on Atlanta. Now, I am, as you probably are aware, a pretty big fan, as in it's probably my favorite series of war games, of the Great Campaigns of the American Civil War series. Now, I've just started looking at Army of the Heartland, okay, and I'm kind of fussing with it while doing 3 other projects. And I've started looking at the rules, and it's less similar to Great Campaigns of the American Civil War than you might assume just based on somebody saying, "Hey, this is a um, operational American Civil War game." Okay, scale in Great Campaigns of the American Civil War is 1 mile per hex, and turns are 1 day. But you can, in principle, conduct a lot of activity in a single day, right? Because there's no hard cap on the number of actions you can take. The only cap is that the amount of fatigue you are loading up onto your troops. Okay. Um, this looks like it owes a little more to Kevin Zucker's Campaigns of Napoleon system, in that there's off-map displays for the armies. Clipper's squeaking a little bit. I think it's time to open it up and clean it again. Now that I have like a workbench to do that on, that'll be great. Um, Let me see if there's a shot of the map, because I mean, I cannot speak highly enough of this fucking map. Okay, I mean, this thing is amazing looking. This photograph from BGG is not doing it justice. These maps are gorgeous. They might end up being a little hard to read, but they are nevertheless gorgeous, and I love them. And even if I end up hating the game, I will put these maps on the wall. Um, the reaction to these has been a little bit divisive. They certainly have not pulled in the attention or the fan base of Great Campaigns of the American Civil War, but they also have not had the backing of a major publisher like Avalon Hill or Multiman to do that. So, I mean, I think that is a component. I will also mention that this game in a Ziploc is still available. This game, meaning Army of the Heartland, is still available from Clash of Arms. And last I checked, which was earlier today, Gray Rooster had a copy too, but they probably don't have. Brant, thanks for stopping by. And yes, the Armchair Dragoons digital convention is coming up. We'll have details on that when it happens. Or when it's closer, I should say. It's MLK weekend, so bear that in mind. Same weekend as Winter Offensive. Very intriguing looking game. My honest expectation is that I am going to end up liking it less than the Great Campaigns of the American Civil War series. But nevertheless, this looks pretty interesting. It looks like it's got some pretty interesting ideas in it. The scale in this game, I think it's 2 or 3 days per turn, and it's 5 miles per hex. So it is. um, it's operational, but it's a higher level operational, right? So some of the considerations in the design are going to be different than they would be at the scale of Great Campaigns of the American Civil War. So much about a war game is the way it is because of the scale. Alistair Logie, welcome back. Not sure what happened, but if it was like me, your computer took a shit. Um, so much of what we see in a war game is dependent on the choice of scale that the designer has made for that game, right? And it is a characteristic of bad design, or at least short-sighted design, to have mechanics that don't fit your scale, or other or parts of the game that don't fit the scale. You ideally you pick a scale based on the features of that historical situation that you as the designer would like to highlight in the design, right? So there isn't necessarily a reason to say, oh well, I'm going to just pick one of these GCACW or this thing, um, or you could have two separate operational systems that are showing you different things that are both interesting. So while I am, again, I'm not sure I like any game system as much as I like Great Campaigns of the American Civil War. So I don't know that this is going to overcome that. But it nevertheless looks interesting. It's got some interesting ideas in it, and I do want to try it. And the fact that it's got amazing looking maps is, also nice. So this is here. Campaigns of Robert E. Lee is coming, and it's also kind of cool that you have. I realize they're just like taken from period portraits of these individuals, but it is kind of cool to have little Rick Barber uh, headshots on all the leader counters. I think you have to agree that that's pretty cool. Um, I spotted McClellan in there. So this looks pretty interesting. Look away. I don't know a whole lot about this, other than that it's the Atlantic campaign. I think the counters are somewhat nicer. I think the map is this guy took the time to scan one counter. Is this like an errata counter or something? Apparently not. This looks like okay. Some bozo in Ireland is selling this for $200. Somebody in the UK is selling it for 20. Which one of them's wrong? $30 here, like new in the US. That might be something that I buy. William Aarons, thank you so much. Prados' books based on secret files from the FOIA archive makes you wonder if he used military intelligence as a large part of his game designs. I mean, yeah, I think that's correct. I mean, I assumed it to be declassified military intelligence because otherwise he'd have gotten in trouble. And he was a fella going through the declassified archives, right? Charles Latora, I have so if I've got some GCACW content on my channel, but if you really want to like a channel that covers that, go to Patrick's Tactics and Tutorials. He is like 95% GCACW. He's got tutorial stuff and playthrough stuff and all that stuff. It's a great series. I love it very much. Um, all right. Uh, Okay. I I mean, okay. I'm not sure what the point is on that. Um, this is also true. So, return free African Americans that were captured in the North. They just rounded them up and shipped them back south to become slaves. They made a movie about that, in fact. So, but this is not really what the show's about either. So, yeah, I'll mention this. So there was some kind of problem with the reprint of Stonewall Jackson's Way 2. I thought I heard it was about the counters, and they said they were going to fix it and it would be available again soon, and that was like a year and a half ago. So I'm not sure what the story was on that, but it is available again now. Stonewall Jackson's Way 2 is a fabulous package. Um, if we're talking about the Robert E. Lee ratings, I unless you know the system, I'm not sure you have context to judge whether the ratings are appropriate or not. So Ken X or Ken 10, thanks for being a grown up. Not that there was anybody else not being a grown up. I'm not sure that that was anybody's intention. So thanks everyone for keeping it cool here in the chat tonight. Next up, after the Americans, what's this thing called again? This is called, according to BGG, the American Civil War Campaigns John Prados series. Okay, there is another very similarly titled Clash of Arms series called the Civil War Campaign series. Those are the area movement games, also with Rick Barber maps. Um, so all right, next up, Crisis Sinai. This is from GMT. Believe it or not, I'm pretty confident I did not know that this was a this was a John Prados design. I thought that this was Gene Billingsley, if anything else, because of Crisis Korea. Um, it doesn't say that it's part of a series, but it certainly has similar trade dress to Crisis Korea. So this is Yom Kippur War, if I'm not mistaken, right? 1970. Yeah, I guess so. 1973. Okay. So this is one of those topics that I have sworn off of until the BCS game on that topic comes out. In which case, I'll pick that up. But I have no opinion on this whatsoever, and no basis with which to form such an opinion. Cold War. Now, this is credited to Lenny Glynn and John Prados. I had this back in the day, and it is, in my opinion, not a particularly good game. It is plausible to me that if I were to, and I mean back in the day, we're talking about the 90s, okay? So it is plausible to me that were I to take another look at it today, that I might find it better or at least more interesting than I did at the time. That said, we now have a decent number of games that do the Cold War, at least two, right? We've got Twilight Struggle, which everybody pretty much likes, even if they don't think it's a war game, and 2 Minutes to Midnight, which is kind of a Twilight Struggle with extra juice, as it were. You know what I'm saying? So I suspect that there's probably some interesting features of the design here. I didn't remember this as a John Prados game. So it could be that Lenny Glynn is the designer and John Prados was like the assistant or the developer or something like that. That's possible. If anybody knows, please mention it in the chat. Like I said, I did not like it back in the day. And this was in fact one of the things that it was one of the I've mentioned before that the folks I played war games with back in the 90s were not fans of victory games as a general thing. Certainly they didn't hate absolutely everything on general principle, but we never played victory games, and so this was one of the very few that I had, and it certainly did not give me a positive impression about the rest of the product line, which is really too bad because there's some fabulous games in that product line. I John, I want to say that 120 might have been the latest printing price. I'm not sure. Everything's more expensive now. Who knows? I don't have any information on that. Nevertheless, this is a pretty highly rated game. Here we come to one of the most highly rated games in the whole list. This is, in fact, Year of the Rat from 1972. And as I mentioned before, what I think really makes this interesting is that you've got the Vietnam War happening. And I got to be honest, these formations are going to be really pretty hard to tell apart. You get the Vietnam War happening, and John Prados decides it's time to make a game about it, right? This did appear in S&T 35. Believe I've seen the flat pack version too, and I personally have seen it. There's pictures of it here. And if you look at you look at this, and it's like, wow, how ambitious must this game have been, right? I mean, this is basically covering a good chunk of the whole country of Vietnam at the time. Um, so it's a pretty well remembered SPI game. Um, I'd really kind of like to take a look at it because it looks pretty interesting. It is kind of the end, yeah, but I mean, it's still a pretty sensitive topic, right? Um, so yeah, I've never owned this, never really particularly closely looked at it. I think you can really see the genius of Redmond Simonson, who's literally doing this map with two colors. It's really amazing graphic design work. Even if it's not pretty in the modern sense. Geek Market has 0 copies of this, and I'm not sure that's just a fluke. Looks like a really interesting game. Who's done videos on this? Kev's done videos on this. Anybody else? Because it kind of looks like no. Um, yeah, that's the only video. So if you want to check that out, go ahead. Looks like a real interesting game, to be honest. And again, it's one of those things. Is like, is this going to really be like the best Vietnam game I've ever played? Probably no, but boy, it'd be interesting to take a look at just for just to see kind of how the information space affects the game design back in 1972, let alone to see how good the game was at, having read more modern scholarship on the subject, which there isn't as much of as we would like. Next up is Knev, Red Parachutes Across the Dnieper. There's a very similarly titled game from called Red Parachutes from Avalanche Press. Now, this is design credit by John Prados. Art credit here is Ina Clausen, Roger McGowan, and Randall Thompson. Now, obviously, that's not Roger McGowan, and obviously, that is Roger McGowan. This would be the People's War Games cover. Is that right? Because People's War Games did an edition of this as well. So there's a Tactics Magazine edition, an S&T edition, and the original from People's War Games. Yeah, that sounds right to me. So this is probably kind of interesting here, actually, and honestly, I feel like People's War Games did some fairly interesting stuff. So another one that I don't know much about, but I'm unwilling to go run it down at premium prices, although ain't much of a premium. And in fact, there's a crap load of copies, but most of these are probably of the S&T edition. Here's a $20 like new S&T edition of it, which I don't know. I don't know. It looks in like it might be interesting. There's some registration problems on these counters, that's for sure. All right, next up is another game that we've already mentioned, Fortress Berlin. This is also from Against the Odds magazine. This is 500 yards to the hex, and this has a pretty infamous map. If we pull this up, whew, that's a lot of gray. I mean, I understand the thematic reasons why it is the way it is, but oof, this looks hard to read to me. Not sure who the artist is. Is this a Mark Mahaffey map? It might be. It says Nico Scooby Craig Grando. Just look, the map looks pretty hard to read. This looks interesting in that sense. Particularly, I guess, if you've got a American airdrop into it. That sounds a bit crazy, but okay. So wow, these are some weird looking counters, man. Check out those counters. Apparently, there were errata counters as well. So these counters are all like on the sheet sideways. That's pretty interesting. I don't know what scale these units are. The fact that there's individual dudes on them suggests to me that maybe the units are platoons. So Perfidious Albion says he's got a buddy who highly recommends Fortress Berlin. I mean, the map's drab, but what do you want? The Candyland map? I mean, it's Berlin in the middle of 1945. It's gonna be gray, okay? So I don't know that I don't I don't know that I can really complain about the map, except in terms of readability. I think it is thematically completely appropriate to the topic of the game. Okay, so here's another one. I'm not sure why Great Pacific War wasn't on the list. This is John, quote unquote, John Prados' Third Reich from Avalanche Press. And I am also, again, I'll be happy to accede to the greater wisdom of somebody who knows more about how this thing got designed. Uh, but I'm not sure how involved John Prados was in this design. This is the box is pretty striking but ugly. The maps are I mean the counters are okay. The map is like okay. But the basic resolution mechanic here is not the same as it is in the classic Third Reich. So lots of folks, which we'll be talking about in a minute for probably 10 or 15 minutes. Yeah, so exactly. I'm not sure that that this is really a John Prados game. This could be, and again, I'll be happy to be corrected on this point. This could be Avalanche Press says, "Hey, John Prados, would you like to? We're going to republish Third Reich. We want to put your name on it. Is that okay? Here's 10 grand or whatever." John Prados said, "Yeah, okay." And then they gave it to Brian Knipple, and Brian Knipplized it. So this does not have a strong reputation. So either as a game in its own right or as a successor to Third Reich. As much as I and a number of other people complain about it, the true successor to Third Reich in the mechanical sense, the inheritor of the sort of methodological basis of Third Reich is a World at War. Okay, if having passed through Advanced Third Reich and Rising Sun, it's not this thing. It is a buckets of dice system. Again, completely different mechanics. Not a good reputation. So here's Panzerkrieg. And this was published by originally, I believe, by OSG. And then it passed through at least one Japanese publisher and ended up at Avalon Hill, not necessarily in that order. I think probably most people will be familiar with this game based on the Avalon Hill edition, which surely had far more copies in circulation than either the OSG edition or the domestic circulation of any of the Japanese products. So this is an interesting description. It's simple mid-complexity war game. Okay, I'm not sure what that means. So it's a simple mid-complexity. I guess that means on the GMT scale of 1 to 9, it would be about a 4. I guess that's how I'd take that statement, but I'm sure it wasn't contextualized in that way at that exact moment. So this is a platoon level game? No, clearly not. This is each game turn represents a week. So not sure which map this is, but it's not a great looking map. This is at least a better photograph than the original, than the photograph we just looked at. So yeah, this looks like it covers quite a lot of the East Front. So that's potentially interesting. So, and I do think that this game was well regarded enough that the game was well regarded enough that I think lots of folks should at least give the Compass version a look. All right. Vince Reese says that he still has his OSG copy, not sure that AH actually improved on it. I mean, that was the case with a lot of the games. They were straight reprints for the most part. There are a couple of cases where the Avalon Hill edition is the better edition for some component reason or another, or there's some variance in there or something like that. One example I can think of is Conquistador. That's one that's like that. Otherwise, it's kind of, half one, half dozen of the other. I after not having it for a long time, I ran down a copy of Freedom in the Galaxy, John Butterfield design, and a game I had tremendous nostalgia for from playing it back in the 80s. And I eventually landed on the decision that I kind of like this. I don't want to get rid of the game, but I kind of prefer to have the SPI version because I like the counter finish better. I like the fact that it's not a mounted map better, so I could put plexi over it anyway because I have to, because this shitty Avalon Hill map buckles anyway. So I don't think it's reasonable to expect that the Avalon Hill version would necessarily improve on the original version, whether it was from SPI or OSG or whoever. Um, so that's about all I have to say about Panzerkrieg, though. Interesting looking game. I think if we see a new version of this from Compass, I think we should give it a look. Next is the shockingly highly rated number 2, Spies. And this is another one where it's credited here to Lenny Glynn and John Prados. And I had this back in the day too, but I don't have strong memories of having played it. I believe I had the Spitzer edition, which is one of those Spitzer editions, which is functionally and just at a glance, it looks identical to the SPI edition. That is the case with a number of the Spitzer games, but not all of them. See also Terrible Swift Sword. Ah, interesting game. This is set in the run up to World War II, and each player takes one of kind of the great powers of the era, and is fighting this espionage war until the actual war breaks out. It's an interesting design. I would love to see somebody tackle this again, either as a a new edition of it, or as a new game that touches on the same themes. But certainly, if we were going to design a game like this today, it would be a very different game than this design from 1981. But interesting. It's an interesting game. Like I said, I'm not sure whether we played it or not. Um, I thought we did, but I don't have strong memories of having done so. It's certainly interesting, and the components are pretty neat. You get like these event tiles that are actually pretty cool and flavorful, I thought. Number one, of course, and this is the game we're probably going to spend a little bit of time on here, is Rise and Decline of the Third Reich. This is one of the most influential war games of all time, in my opinion. Certainly, any game that has attempted to cover all of World War II at something like this scale, and there have been quite a lot of them, and that includes the obvious ones like Advanced Third Reich and World at War, but it also includes the less obvious ones like Axis and Allies. I think Axis and Allies was strongly influenced by this game. The economic system of Axis and Allies is not that dissimilar from the economic system of Third Reich, other than that it's much simpler and easier to deal with. Um, no, I believe Advanced Third Reich, we can look at that. I believe Advanced Third Reich was a Bruce Harper. Yeah, Bruce Harper. And then Empire of the Rising Sun was kind of the companion game to Advanced Third Reich. Um, but Third Reich is a John Prados game, and again, tremendously influential. This sort of idea whereby this economic foundation of the country really sets the course of what that country can do and accomplish, and has its impact on the results of the war too. This got played to death, okay? And there's, I believe, as I recall, 3 or 4 editions from Avalon Hill, and there's some subsequent fan editions of this. The thing that happens with these games that get played as much as this did is people identify exploits, okay? And this is a natural eventuality. I'm going to actually pull that down at this point. This is, it's just something that happens. If it gets played 10,000 times, some percentage of those people are going to find, they're going to find problems with the game and holes they can punch, or at least uh, things they can exploit to the detriment of a specific opponent that maybe doesn't know the trick, right? So, subsequent versions of the rules would come along and say, oh, well, these guys did that in a tournament, so we got to fix that. So they'd put a rule in to fix it. And then the next edition, they'd find the latest round of exploits and they'd put some rules in to fix them. And then the next edition of the rules, they put some more rules in to fix those exploits, some of which were created by the previous exploits fixes. And that is basically the story of the development of Third Reich all the way down to the present day, as a world at war, to the extent that Bruce Harper now puts out a new edition of his rule book electronically every, I believe, 6 months. Now, I'm not going to get any heartburn over the fact that Bruce keeps updating the rules. That in itself is not a problem. But it does, I think, indicate indicative of a particular situation whereby a game is so popular that there's enough critical mass of players to break the thing, right? Um, that in a sense is great on behalf of the game because it's super popular. But that certainly happened here. In terms of that sort of economic underpinning of the Third Reich, every subsequent game has had that in it somewhere. Even something like Struggle for Europe, and I'm talking about the Worthington Struggle for Europe, not the Clash of Arms Struggle for Europe. Even that has economics built into the game. It's built into the decks. So every one of these things at this point is the inheritor of the traditions of Third Reich. This is, in a sense, again, one of the most impactful and influential games in the history of the hobby. Um, I think it's more influential than Squad Leader, for example. As impactful as Squad Leader is, I think of the two, Panzer Blitz is the more between Squad Leader and Panzer Blitz. I think Panzer Blitz is more influential. I didn't say better, but I think it's more influential. But I mean, I don't think either of them is as influential as this thing. This is incredibly, influential game. No, I've always Croc Commander 1983 says it's updated once a year. It is mostly clarifications, but in the last 2 or 3 years, there's been some kind of major change. I forget the details. There's been some major changes to the oil rules and stuff like that. It is mostly just clarifications and padding out of edge cases. That's absolutely correct. There's nothing really wrong. There are people who have like a strong objection to them updating the rules every however long it is. I really don't have a problem with that. I think that's going to happen. I'd rather see the rules get updated than, not, right? If there's some kind of exploit or hole or bug or something like that, I'd go ahead and fix it. That's fine. If we have to talk about replacing components, that's a little bit of a different story. But if it's just an electronic update to the rules, I have no particular issue with that, and I'm a little baffled by people who do have a big issue with that. Yeah, and that's probably, I mean, I do think we're going to have like general like waves, if you will, of impact in terms of influence of a particular game, and if we're talking about the 70s, then yeah, these are the games that we're talking about. But don't forget that and if we were talking about the 80s, we'd have a different set of games, and if we were talking about the 90s, we'd have a different set of most influential games, and so on and so forth. But influence is not the end of the story, right? So I'm gonna make a music analogy here. One of the reasons why Led Zeppelin was so popular was because Jimmy Page was a great guitarist, right? Um, but the fact is that everybody heard Led Zeppelin and everybody started trying to play like Jimmy Page, and a lot of them succeeded and sounded a lot like Jimmy Page. And there was a style that Jimmy Page became kind of the progenitor of that sounded a lot like Jimmy Page. Um, Examples abound of this, right? Of so and so is really influential or popular, or whatever. There's some stuff that sounds a lot like the Beatles, that was influenced by the Beatles. At the same time, just from a guitar player standpoint, how many people are there that sound like Jimi Hendrix? Boy, not very many, because everybody tried to sound like Jimi Hendrix, and there's like, no, there's no way I can do this. I'll go back to trying to sound like Jimmy Page, right? So there's unique masterpieces that aren't particularly influential as such, or at least their influence can't be easily identified, but they're nevertheless tremendously important. Um, an example of this from the 90s, I think it's the 90s, might have been the aughts, would be Empire of the Sun, right? Which is a tremendous game that I have praised high heaven any number of times, which I will continue to do so. But I don't really feel like a lot of other games have even tried to accomplish what Empire of the Sun has done. I mean, even Mark, who's supposedly working on a Mediterranean game based on that same basic idea, I don't know that I don't know how far that's gotten either. That's just kind of one of those miracle games where everything's it's just brilliant and that's it, and it's hard to copy because it's so brilliant. Um, so just saying it's influential isn't necessarily the prop some folks might be inclined to take it as. But certainly it's nice to be thought of as influential. Um, there's stuff in here where I have no idea what it actually is. John C. from the sunny Philippines. Are we talking Bob Denver or John Denver? I'm confused now. Yeah, I mean, folks, I think that like the 70s heyday of Third Reich was actually before I was into wargaming, okay? Because I got in right around 1980. And even then, was hard and even then, right? Another thing that I think we have to take into historical perspective is the fact that Avalon Hill had this 10 out of 10 complexity scale, and they rated very few games at 10. But they rated Third Reich a 10, right? If you go look at that, and this is actually why I have a copy on the shelf. I don't think you can see it, but this is actually why I ran down a copy, which, by the way, I paid like $5 for. Um, the You look at that rule book now, and you're like, this is like a 6 or a 7, maybe. This is not a particularly complicated game by modern standards. And yet, at the time, Avalon Hill was in 1974. Avalon Hill wasn't necessarily wrong to assign that complexity code, right? Um, it's that the landscape has changed. Um, ugh. So John asked a question that I think a lot of people are gonna think about and maybe frame in a different way. My answer to this is no, I don't think so. I think the peak of wargaming is right now. I mean, unless you're trying to be cute and you're saying the peak of wargaming is when you're 13 and can just live on Red Pop and stay up all night playing Third Reich. I mean, that's great and all, but none of us have the ability to do that anymore. So, well, some of us do. Some of us are retirees, but then we can't have the Red Pop because we got the diabetes. But uh, longest day might have been a 10. They had like I think Magic Realm was a 10. And I want to say that the advanced game from Freedom in the Galaxy may have been a 10 as well. Very few of those games were 10s, I can tell you that. But no, I think we're peaking right now, frankly. Not that those days aren't important, right? We're all standing in the footsteps of giants and all that jazz. But uh, and that's not to downplay the importance of the era that a lot of us at least started playing these things in. But frankly, I think from an industry standpoint, from a creativity standpoint, it might feel like um, that was a creative peak, and certainly in some sense it was. You had people like Jim Dunnigan, who is I don't know of any reason I can't call him a genius, coming up with absolutely outlandish new ideas on a regular basis. Um, and but we're still seeing that, right? That hasn't gone away. It's just different people, right? We're still seeing people doing innovative stuff. And we have a much larger volume of games coming out on a month to month basis that now than they did back then. And even if you want to say, oh yeah, but a lot of them are like these Euro-y things, blah, 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 blah. And that okay, a lot of them are, but they're still, even if you look at the hex and counter stuff, and I'm not talking about point to point, I'm talking about hex and counter stuff. On a month to month basis, there's more coming out now than there's ever been. So um I think that Rudy's right, and that it is definitely all Geritol and prune juice. which, as you know, is a warrior's drink. But I think I'm always reluctant to assign. And I say stuff like this too, frankly. So in all seriousness, it's unwise to try to assign a simple cause to a complex situation. Remember that, and we've talked about this before. Remember that a lot of people, including Jim Dunnigan, flatly predicted that computer war games were going to be the future of war games. War games wouldn't go away; they would just be on computers, and that hasn't happened at all. Computer war games are mostly shit, and manual analog gaming has been resurrected in a lot of different forms in the board games, role-playing games, war games, whatever, has been resurrected in a major way because and frankly, I think Vassal has been a contributing factor, absolutely. But at the same time, um, Vassal is kind of an intermediate step between playing a game as a computer game and playing a game as a tabletop game with your buddies, right? You can still play a tabletop game with your buddies, but you're playing it on the computer. The fact is that a lot of people spend a lot of their time sitting in front of a computer, and they don't necessarily want to then do their recreation activities in front of a computer. I completely sympathize with this point of view, to say the least. We have just finished clipping Monty's D-Day, by the way. It is only one counter sheet, so not a huge shock. Oh, that was a good one. I'm not really sure that I've also got really poor lighting in here right now. It's lighting that works for the stream, but it's also pretty bad for looking at counters. So I bought new lights for in there. It's like the surface of fucking Mercury. Okay, so we are covered on lights for the game room at this point. Fast Hines says that the best computer. I would agree with this. The best computer war games were the ones by John Tiller. I would absolutely agree with this. And I've even been told that the AI is not that bad, but to what extent that's true, I don't know. But it's never been the AI that's been a problem. I can always dumb myself down to compensate for a shitty AI. What I don't like is a computer war game that doesn't feel like a war game to me. Um, I have a bigger problem with that. And yeah, I've got kind of stultified, if you will, ideas of what a war game is. I'll totally cop to that. But that doesn't change the way I feel about the landscape on. I really wanted to get this in a more compact way, but that can wait till later. On the other hand, among a few others, the John Tiller stuff does feel like a war game. Now, I think those are like coming back in partnership with Matrix Games or Slytherin, maybe something like that. Um, I did. I played the shit out of Total War at one point, the original Total War Medieval, I believe, and I really loved it. But just like playing Civilization, which was Civ 2 back in the day, I tried to play it again recently and just really couldn't get it. Not that recently, like in the last 10 years, and I just couldn't get into it. It just doesn't seem like a good um, substitute, right? War Plan's okay. It's better than Strategic Command, I'll tell you that. But I have a very low opinion of Strategic Command anyway. War Plan is better. Yeah, War Game Design Studio are working on the Tiller stuff, but I think they're publishing through Matrix Games. Am I right about that? Am I right about that, or am I just on dope? That's possible. I mean, this is true of lots of folks. This is absolutely true. This is why I say no. That's definitely a factor. But I just don't think that's the only factor. I don't think that explains the sort of large scale sociological thing. Now, has it helped war games specifically kind of be carried along with that bigger trend of analog games? Also, again, yes. I've played the first Gary Grigsby's War in the East, and I don't have the second one yet. And I have a pretty high opinion of it, actually. It's pretty good. It's pretty fussy, but you don't necessarily have to be as fussy as the game allows you to be anyway. I like Stellaris a lot, actually. I've probably put 150 hours into Stellaris over the years, but I don't know that I'd call it a war game. The definition of war game on a computer is a little different, right? So maybe it is on a computer. I don't care. In any event, right? The I guess the thesis um, our discussion of John Prados and his game design legacy is that I think we could probably all get behind the statement that the capstone here is in fact um, Third Reich. It's just had such a huge influence on so many games, and it's a great game, right? I mean, it's not just that it's been influential; it's also a great game. Um, so anybody would be happy to have that in their repertoire. Let me put it that way. And a lot of the other designs look very interesting as well. And I'm a bit sad to say I've only got 5 John Prados games. Clearly, there's some more that I need. So, um, in any event, we're gonna finish this off. I feel like I sound super gravelly. My computer's obviously got COVID too. Ugh. Prophecy Albion says that it took decades before the graphics became decent enough to reflect the feel of traditional war games. Uh, so yes, but this is also bullshit because graphics in other games that aren't trying to be war games have been good for a long time. And the people trying to publish computer war games have just been doing a shitty job at it. So I mean, the technology was there. We weren't waiting on the technology. It's just that we're finally getting some of these publishers, at least, to come up with stuff that doesn't look like it was designed in the 80s for the Atari 2600. Um, so late June Wargaming convention. Brant would know. Look at the armchair drag. Actually, it's linked in the video description. Look at the Wargame events calendar. That's right around the time of Origins. But honestly, John, if you want to go to a wargaming convention, Origins isn't the first or the second or the third or probably fourth or fifth that I would recommend. If you want to go to a game convention and maybe play some war games, then great. It's a fabulous event. But it isn't a war game event. And if you want to do serious wargaming, you better bring it yourself, right? And you better bring your opponents too. So, John Prados, huge legacy that is going to be difficult to equal. I mean, one of not as many game designs certainly as some of these folks, but I think there's a lot of really impactful game designs in here, and quite innovative game designs as well. So as we bid a farewell to John Prados, um, on the next leg of whatever journey he's on right now, we can look back and look at these designs. I got the screen share pulled up, even though I'm not looking at it. um, we can look back at these designs and hell, I think Third Reich is still a highly playable game today. So I wouldn't blame anybody that just wanted to say, you know what, screw World at War. I'm just gonna play Third Reich. It's good. It is good. So, what else do we have to talk about it? So, if you want to see some, I'll mention this. I feel like there's a bit of significant uptick in interest in Labatai based on just the general internet crosstalk. And part of that's Eric doing his level best to play Labatai every week on his channel. So he has his pretty much as soon as I wrap up here, Eric starts streaming over at Eric's Table Napoleonic Battles. Usually it's Labatai, sometimes it'll be Battles of the Age of Reason. So go check that out if you want to see live Vassal generally play of Labatai. I know that Mark Ruggiero, Clark Commando 1983, has also recently bought into Labatai, and I mean bought in on it in a couple of different ways, if you know what I'm saying. Um, but Mark's enthusiasm carries a huge amount of interest along with him, because he is so enthusiastic about everything that he like super gets into. So hey Mark, thanks for stopping by. It also due to Mark doing a lot of posting about it, and I've done some posting about it, and a few other people have posted about it. I'm now starting to hear from people. It's like, yeah, this Labatai thing sounds pretty interesting. So this is true. So, like I said before at the top of the show, I did have it in my mind for quite a long time to do a best of a given designer. Richard Burke's probably going to take 2 shows, frankly. How to split those is a great question, and I'm not 100% sure how I would do that. But I might just need to prepare the shit out of it and split the shows in some kind of thematically appropriate way, like, you know, 1900 on to pre 1900. A lot of where you put that split for Richard Berg would be difficult. So, because he very prolific designer to say the least. But as we can also see, trying to dredge this information out of BGG is not necessarily optimal either. So, Meandering Mike, go subscribe to Meandering Mike if you are not already subscribed. He is doing more giveaways. I put myself in for the giveaway over there because he had a copy of Federal Alliances. But then as always, I am the least patient person on the planet. So I went to Compass Expo and said, fuck it, I'm buying it. And I bought it. And then I bought another copy. And then I went home and said, Mike, remove me from the drawing. So Mark, see you later. We will, sounds like we're going to be playing some Labatai at Buckeye Game Fest in Columbus in April. I believe it's in April. So if anybody needs info about that, let me know. It kind of sounds to me like we might have enough people for 2 tables of Labatai, one of which will be running Mont Saint Jean. So, there you go. Alistair is the big winner lately. Let me put it that way. Mike will get his subscriber count, I'm sure, in short order. So what else is going on? We have 2 videos coming out this week. So we're on tomorrow with Dan at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. That's on Dan's channel. We have an unboxing video of La Bataille de Quatre Bras on Thursday, and then we have the storage solutions video for La Bataille de Quatre Bras, but I also do Fatal Alliances in that video. And I think the storage method will apply to basically any La Bataille game. Let me know if there's any technical issues happening right now. I don't think so, but I could be wrong here. I am posting Meandering Mike's, who pinged me like an hour ago. Okay. This is to Mike's giveaway. So if anybody wants to go check that out via the link directly, go ahead. I feel like the methodology that I picked for La Bataille de Quatre Bras will work well for any Labatt game. I use the same methodology for Vauchamp, which is a much smaller game. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to use the same one for the big ones as well. That Gloria, I don't know, Monopoly. This is possible though. I think that looks like it's got might be having a lot going for it. So on this subject, I believe Quatre Bras is still available, and if it's not, then it's relatively easy to get. But it might only be available on in a Ziploc. Ligny is now only available in a Ziploc. The others that are in print are La Bataille de Mont Saint Jean, which is available in 2 different versions. There's the expansion version, which you can get that if you already have Ligny and Quatre Bras. And there's the full version, the deluxe edition, which is the one I unboxed last week, or 2 months ago, but you saw the video last week, which is the standalone version, which basically has all the counters, all the displays and stuff for Ligny and Quatre Bras on the Waterloo maps of the Waterloo rules, right? So I am completely sympathetic to people excited about Glory and Empire, by the way. I probably need to get in on that, if nothing else. So it looks very enticing. And the designer is a veteran. The guy, shit. I'm blanking on the designer's name. And I'm conflating it with a guy who I know is not a wargame designer. The designer is the designer of La Bataille de la Moskva, the new edition of La Bataille de la Moskva. So the other that it is also battalion scale, and it's the same, I believe, 15 or 20-minute turns as well. And we will need to have parallel battles in the same system, and the battles that the first version of Glory and Empire will contain are not battles that I think La Bataille has covered. I think that honestly, I feel like company scale Napoleonics is an absurdity. I think it's an absurdity. I think if you want the most granular, meaningful level of detail, battalions are fine. G&E publisher is Lock and Load Publishing. There is a crowdfunding campaign out for it right now, which I believe is still open. Terry Doherty, that's the thing. I got another guy named Terry who's an SCA, old SCA buddy of mine, that I couldn't get that name out of my head. But yeah, he's the guy that redid La Bataille de la Moskva for Clash of Arms in the second, very nice second edition, by the way. So that's the videos that's coming out this week, though. We've got the two, and they're both on Quattro Bra, but you get bonus content in the Storage Solutions video. Not sure I'm going to get more than 2 videos a week out in the next couple of weeks, but you know, I think that is okay. Maybe. I mean, I just don't think you're going to like form a square out of a bunch of different company counters. Is that how that's going to work? That seems crazy. I mean, if you have something specific that scale will show that the battalion scale won't, then I am willing to listen and have that conversation. I'm just not convinced. Well, yes, this is kind of the Grognard simulations methodology here. This is what they do. And yes, New England simulation is literally one guy. So I don't believe for a minute that this is vaporware. If you look at the history of New England simulations, they release a game once every 3 to 6 years. That is the history of this of the company. They release extremely polished material. So generally, folks have found that it is worth the wait. I have absolute confidence that unless the meteorite hits or something like that, that they will come out with that. They had it on a table at Compass Expo last year. So, I think battalions are a little too small for to show anything particularly interesting in Civil War too. I think good tactical scale for Civil War is regimental, and for Napoleonics it's battalions. Yes, this is true, but again, you know, they're taking their time with it. That's just what they do. They've actually got multiple games in the pipeline, although I'm pretty sure that Winter's Victory is the thing that's next. I mean, I don't know hey, if Marty Sample was here, talk to Marty Sample. He's going to have the inside scoop. He apparently goes and has dinner at his house every night or every week or something like that, because he seems to be well in the loop of what's going on with New England simulations. So, but I have that is called this is called big board gaming, I believe. And if you're finding that confusing, you're not alone. If you search, let me see if I can find the guy. The trouble is this, if you search for, oh, wait. The trouble is that if you search for this, I mean, this is not a problem as such. It's just that you're going to get Kev if you search for this. I'm going to put a link in. There it is. Yeah, this is it. I'm going to put a link in the chat to the Facebook page. Hopefully this is okay. So to answer Alistair's question, so that's the big, it is expensive, but if you're like really love Empire of the Sun and you really want that deluxe treatment of Empire of the Sun, then go buy it. I would absolutely say it's totally worth it. So the Mont Saint Jean Deluxe Edition does not quote unquote contain Ligny and Quatre Bras. It has the counters and the unit organization displays from those 2 games. It does not have the game specific rules nor the maps. So if you want all 3 battles, you either need to buy well, you need to buy Linnea and Quatre Bras. Or you can buy Linnea and Quatre Bras and then just get the expansion kit for Mont Saint Jean, which is basically just the rules of the maps. Um, and it's only like $45 or something like that. It's pretty inexpensive, and I think it's even cheaper than that from a Gray Rooster. So yes, this is exactly right. Yeah, these big games are very appealing for conventions too. I have to agree with that. We saw several of them on tables at Compass Expo. Oh, so this is at some point we're going to do block war games, okay, or Columbia and Gamma 2 or whatever. Gamma 2 basically turned into Columbia games. Their first block game, I want to say, was Quebec 1859, and then they did a couple of other ones. Napoleon was the one that eventually made its way to Avalon Hill through whatever mechanism that happened by. And then Columbia ended up with it back again from however that happened. And they have kept it in print to this day. So Gamma 2, Columbia Games, pretty much the same people. That game plus the Avalon Hill Napoleon plus the fourth edition Napoleon that's available from Columbia now, which is a classic. All pretty much the same game. So oh god. So La Bataille is handily more complicated than anything a OSG has ever done. The So here's the cool thing about this. Garrison Venn asks if I finished reading the premiere rules. So there is I let's say the premiere rules are written in an unconventional way, okay? Which doesn't isn't bad necessarily, but it's unconventional. It takes a significant amount of getting used to. What I found was when I got Vauchamp, because it's in the magazine, they can't do that all this bullshit Three Musketeers prose, okay? They got to get it done in like 16 pages. And that's what it is. It's like a 20-page rule book. So they compressed all that. They even like there's even a list of what they had to leave out that because like the certain kinds of cavalry aren't there. Um, but the I think the best rule book to learn the premier rules on is the Vauchamp rule book. Let me put it that way. Stigler, where I am with, I've been thinking about this because we had this conversation a little while ago. And I think the real answer is that the Library of Napoleonic Battles is neither tactical nor operational. I think that ends up being the answer. It's got a scale that it inherited from its original roots as an SPI quad. So you had to fit 4 battles in the same on this basically on the same counter sheet or on the same 2 counter sheets. One SPI counter sheet because they were double sized. No, John Prados did not design rules for Labatt. Sorry about that, but we're wrapping the show up. Actually, any minute now because it's after 10. And I want for those interested in Labatt, go check out Eric's channel. So if I had a way to push you all to Eric's channel, like you can do on Twitch, I would do that. But I do not. So unless I do, I don't think so. I don't think so. We're not having amazing connectivity here tonight or computer performance. Yeah, but see, it doesn't really have any operational detail either. It does have tactical details, a few. It does have operational details, a few, but it's not really satisfying if you want an operational game, nor is it fully satisfying as a tactical game. It is kind of neither. It fits in an odd space between the two, and it's its own thing, right? Um, I think that is where I am landing on this. John Madison, thanks for stopping by. We are moving on. Meandering Mike's having his giveaway tonight, so go check that out as well. Everybody, this is what I was saying for the last couple of years, and I'm not sure I was right. Maybe we need to have a discussion about that. Maybe we can involve Genghis Khan crossing the Alps at the head of an army of moose, as we did last week on the Everything You Wanted to Know About Wargamers show. La Bataille de Vauchamp is out of print, but they had a limited number of copies that you could get if you put a certain code in. don't ask me what the code was. You'd have to go back to the Facebook page, and you had to order like $100 worth of stuff, and they threw that in for free. And it's like a CD, like a couple displays. It doesn't even have the displays, like 2-player aid cards and the counters and the maps, and that's it. So you have to print the rules and the most of the player aids yourself. All right, folks, this has been great. I'm glad that we got to talk about John Prados and his at least his design impact. Go read the article linked in the video description. Again, we'll be back on tomorrow night with Dan on Dan's channel at 7:30 p.m. So if you've got the stomach for that, by all means, tune in. And we've got 2 videos coming out later this week. One is the unboxing of La Bataille de Quatre Bras, and the second is the storage solutions video on La Bataille de Quatre Bras. Thanks for watching. We'll see you all next week. Same time, same channel.